downstairs brain. So when we look at the downstairs brain is really the primitive brain. And the downstairs brain is comprised of the limbic system and the brainstem. Okay, so they're really at a, they call it, researchers actually call it the primitive brain. This is what it's called because it's in charge of the fight or flight, it's in charge of our reflexes, it's in charge of, let's say, breathing and blinking, really involved in aspects of our survival, that kind of reaction that you want, like automatic, that fight or flight, which is very instinctual. And then we have the upstairs brain, and the upstairs brain is more the cerebral cortex. And the cerebral cortex is a very, very sophisticated system. And when we look at that, the cerebral cortex, it's really where we talk about thinking, imagination, planning, problem solving, empathy, all these good things, okay? So really much higher order thinking versus, as we said, the lower brain, the downstairs brain, which is really instinctual. So once again, we want both sides of our brains to really function. It's not when you see, for instance, a fire that you're going to look at it and try to logically plan it out. I mean, there's certain things that we have to get out of the way, hurry up, move, right? You have to allow this acting before thinking to happen. But at the same time, we don't want that side of our brain to really be what is always overtaking our decision making. We want that higher sophisticated brain to really be able to think things through, be more logical, be more empathetic, really look at all pieces of the planning, use our imagination, our creativity. We want higher order thinking. With that being said, there's two things to keep in mind that are really important to know about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. The downstairs brain is pretty much set at birth. You know, the way it is the way that it is. It's your instinct, it's your fight or flight, all the blinking, all the, breathing. Those are automatic reactions in the body that just occur. So it's pretty much set at birth. But when we look at the upstairs brain is actually, as we said, a lot more sophisticated, higher order thinking. There's a lot more processing involved. It actually continues developing up to our mid-20s, right? So it's almost illogical on our part to think that our child has this higher order thinking when they're so young, because they don't. They actually absolutely do not. It starts developing the first few years of life, of course. Then in their teenage years, there's a higher order that gets reorganized, let's say. And then in our mid-20s, there's pretty much, a full integration, a full development of the cerebral cortex. But from a younger age, children do not have a developed cerebral cortex, which is that, higher order thinking, having empathy. How does someone think about what I'm thinking about, the theory of mind? How do I plan something out? How do I problem solve? How do I not enter a fight, but I stop and think about it first before entering it? All that stuff, again, our brain has developed that up to our mid-20s. That's when it gets completely developed. So you can imagine how illogical it is on our part to really expect young children to have that impulse control when things happen and want them to stop before, they act and think about it beforehand. It's not that we're going to excuse them of it, but it's just illogical for us to expect that of them. And we have to expect instead that it's something that they are developing and that we have to provide opportunities for them to make those connections. It's not happening on their own, and it's not that there's something wrong with your child if they're not doing it. They're not supposed to be doing it, right, when they're younger. We need to provide those opportunities, those learning opportunities when it comes up, and that they are in these situations. We help them run through those processes so that they learn how to develop that upstairs brain more efficiently. The second thing that we have to keep in mind also is that in the lower brain, the downstairs brain, we have a little area called the amygdala, and it's part of the limbic system. And the amygdala is what, again, gets you to act before even thinking, okay? And what it does is like high emotionality, especially in situations of high fear or high anger. This is when the amygdala kicks in. And again, that's the part of the brain that allows us to act before even thinking. And it's an important part of the brain, as we said. When you are in danger, you don't want to, wait and think about it. You want that there should be that action that happens before. But in younger children, what ends up happening is the amygdala takes over, and it's almost like it hijacks the brain, and it takes over the upstairs brain. And now there is zero connection to the upstairs brain. Almost like there's a staircase usually that connects the downstairs brain to the upstairs brain. But when the amygdala kicks in, when there's these high emotional situations, there's like a little barrier that gets placed between the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain, and there's no affecting it. There's no way to access the upstairs brain. So two things to keep in mind, like we said, not only is the upstairs brain not completely developed in childhood, but then also whatever is accessible, when the amygdala kicks in, the downstairs brain kicks in, there is zero connection. That bridge just got, blocked right there. So there is no connection to go ahead and be able to access those areas of our brain that is a lot more logical and more, planned and more sophisticated. The technique that the book teaches in order to integrate the upstairs and the downstairs brain is called engage and don't enrage. So you pretty much want to ask yourself all the time when a situation happens, what area of my child's brain am I tapping into? Am I triggering the downstairs brain, or am I appealing to that upstairs brain? Okay, and so when you can think of it that way, actually, the parenting piece is a lot easier and you're less likely to go into it emotionally yourself and get wrapped up in it, because you realize from a physiological standpoint that your child's brain is being hijacked by this downstairs brain that is more primitive and is really taking over any sense of logic. So if you can look at it like that, you realize that it's not so much that it's your child's fault, but rather it's a bodily function that's happening and that we have to appeal to it on a brain level. So engage and don't enrage means that you will first appeal to that downstairs brain on an emotional level so that you can then access the upstairs more logical brain. So if your child, for instance, is having a tantrum about something, you want to do what we said before, the same thing, you connect and redirect, same idea, appeal to that downstairs brain through the emotional piece. You can do that by naming the emotion. So if you look like you're feeling overwhelmed, or you look like you're really angry about this, right? So name the emotion for them. The other thing you can do is actually physically move the child, especially when they're younger, move them out of the situation that they're in, right? So change rooms, like shift that. Try to help them shift. It'll help that amygdala also shift as well. And then the third thing that you can do is also, if it's appropriate, use humor, right? To be silly about something. It could also just redirect where the situation is going, if you could use humor. So this is nice to have a little toolbox of things that you can do so that you can try them and see which ones work at which times. Because if your child, for instance, is completely taken over by their downstairs brain, and you start cracking jokes about what's happening or try to be funny about it, and they're not having it, they might get even more enraged. So you really want to see where your child is at, and you know your child more than anyone else, and you know which techniques at that moment would be a lot more appealing to them. Okay, what you could do during times of high emotionality with your child is help them find the words to name that emotion. Again, it'll name it and tame it. And then once they can name that emotion with you, you can then start seeing how you can use that situation to be able to redirect them in terms of finding a logical way of solving what's going on. So it could be, for example, that your child is really upset about being at a store and that they can't have something that they want, and that they cry about it and they lose it and they get really angry about it. And so you enter that, instead of saying things like, I don't have to buy you everything all the time, you have enough toys at home, right? You can just appeal to the emotion by saying that you look really sad that you're not getting that toy. What is it about that toy that you really love? right? Once they, it's almost like they take a little step back and they can answer those questions. You can redirect it by finding more logical and problem-solving approaches to what's happening in that moment. So you can say things like, like let's say mommy doesn't want to buy that toy. We're not buying toys all the time. Is there a game at home that you haven't played in a while that we can play together? Or, you get allowance. What if we work on getting more allowance so that you can purchase the toy, right? So, but you don't want to offer those solutions beforehand, before having appealed to that more emotional side of the brain. And at the same time, once you have tapped into taming that more emotional side, you can ask your child for solutions. I know you really want that toy, but mommy can't get that for you, but what is another way that we can get it, right? Sometimes they're like, give them that little minute to start thinking about it more logically. Again, the idea of parenting, I love from this book that it looks at it from a brain-based level. I love all the strategies that are provided in this book, and again, I highly recommend it because it gives you a little bit more understanding of what's going on in our children, and again, you become the parent that your child needs in that moment versus getting all these other things that, that white noise or that noise that we talk about that can overshadow the parenting piece in the moment. But you really look at your child from a point of view of what does my child need, and what are the opportunities that I can provide my child in this moment so that it's a learning opportunity. So now that I help them gain skills, life skills, to be able to integrate their brain and to be able to find much better balance as adults. Again, you're looking at these areas where you think maybe your child needs more discipline and a disciplinary approach. You're now looking at it as, if I enter it with that discipline, like with a little smack or with a yell or with a punishment, I really lost an opportunity to allow my child to learn how to look inside themselves to find those solutions and integrate all sides of their brain so that they can show up in a much more balanced way, and that they don't have to depend on you to be the one who guides them every step of the way. They can really learn to parent themselves. So what I love is that on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, we learn about motivating children and teaching them to self-parent, which is the beauty of them learning to look inside and to be able to parent themselves, to do right, whether our parents are around or not. And then on the other hand, when we look at it on a very brain-based level, we also look at it as, how do I create opportunities when something goes quote-unquote wrong? How do I look at these as opportunities for my child to learn to self-parent, because I will teach them how to integrate different sides of their brain so that they can find more balance and be able to, they themselves tap in to more higher order thinking of how do I, in a very balanced way, resolve what's going on.